"You're nothing but a fool, Mr. Williams." Attorney Benjamin Carter sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance. His sharp, expensive suit gleamed under the courtroom lights as he smirked at the man sitting across from him. "You don't belong here. A man like you trying to argue against someone like me? Laughable." The room went silent. Gasps echoed from the jury box. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. At the defendant's table, Henry Williams sat quietly. A simple man, dressed in an old but neatly pressed suit, he did not react to the insult. He just folded his hands and looked at Benjamin with calm eyes. That was the moment everything changed. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Henry said, standing up. His voice was firm but kind. "Mr. Carter believes intelligence comes from wealth, from fancy words, from an expensive law degree. But today, I will show you that true intelligence is not about arrogance. It is about wisdom, patience, and knowing when to strike." A slow murmur filled the room. Benjamin's smirk faded slightly. Then, Henry took a deep breath and said something that made the entire courtroom freeze. "Before this trial is over, I will prove that Mr. Carter's entire case is built on lies, and that he knows it." Silence. Benjamin's jaw clenched. The judge leaned forward. The jury sat up straighter. And then, let's go back to where it all began. 2 months earlier, Henry Williams never imagined he'd be standing in a courtroom. He was a simple man, running a small bookstore in a quiet town. Life had never been easy for him, but he believed in kindness and hard work. Then, disaster struck. One evening, as Henry was closing up shop, 2 police officers knocked on his door. "Mr. Williams, we need you to come with us," one of them said. Confused, Henry wiped his hands on his apron. "Is something wrong?" The officer's face was unreadable. "You've been accused of theft. A large amount of money was stolen from Carter Enterprises, and you were seen near the crime scene." Henry laughed at first. "That must be a mistake. I haven't stolen anything in my life." But the officers weren't laughing. "Sir, you have the right to remain silent." The cold steel of handcuffs clamped around his wrists. Panic filled his chest. His bookstore, his reputation, his life. It was all about to be torn apart. The next morning, Henry sat in a holding cell, his heart pounding. He had never been in trouble before. He was a good man. How could this happen? Then, he met his court-appointed lawyer, a nervous, young man named Peter Hale. Peter walked into the cell, clutching his briefcase like it was a shield. Mr. Williams?" Henry stood. "Yes. Do you know what's going on?" Peter sighed. "Not good. The prosecution has a witness who claims they saw you leaving Carter Enterprises the night of the robbery. And worse, Benjamin Carter is the lead attorney." Henry frowned. "Who's Benjamin Carter?" Peter groaned. "The most ruthless lawyer in the state. He wins every case because he doesn't play fair. He buries people in legal tricks, insults them, makes them look like fools. And he loves humiliating people he thinks are beneath him." Henry took a deep breath. "I didn't do this. I don't have money for a fancy defense. But I won't let a bully ruin my life." Peter nodded. "All right, let's fight." The first day of the trial was brutal. Benjamin Carter attacked Henry from the start. "Mr. Williams," he said with a mocking smile, "you run a failing bookstore, correct?" Henry clenched his fists but stayed calm. "It's not failing." Benjamin chuckled. "Really? Then why are you thousands of dollars in debt?" The jury shifted uncomfortably. Henry's face burned. Yes, money had been tight, but that didn't mean he was a thief. Benjamin kept going. "You were seen near Carter Enterprises on the night of the robbery. Do you deny that?" Henry hesitated. "No, I was walking home that night, but I never went inside." Benjamin turned to the jury, shaking his head dramatically. "Ladies and gentlemen, he just admitted to being at the crime scene. What a coincidence." The prosecution's witness, a security guard, took the stand. "I saw Mr. Williams near the building around 11 p.m. He was looking around suspiciously." Henry's stomach dropped. This was bad. Then, Benjamin smirked. "Tell me, Mr. Williams, do you even understand how the law works? Or are you just making this up as you go?" Henry gritted his teeth. The insult stung, but he said nothing. Benjamin leaned in. "You're nothing but a fool, Mr. Williams." And then, The courtroom held its breath. Henry stood up, pushing his chair back. His voice was steady. "Mr. Carter, I may not be rich like you, but I know the difference between truth and deception, and I will prove it." Benjamin laughed. "And how do you plan to do that?" Henry smiled, calm as ever. "By showing that the real liar in this room is you." The jury gasped. The judge's gavel slammed down. The tension in the room reached its breaking point. But Henry wasn't finished. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I have evidence that will turn this entire case upside down." The room fell silent. The judge frowned. "Mr. Williams, what are you talking about?" Henry took a deep breath. "I have proof that Benjamin Carter knows exactly who committed this crime, because he's been protecting them all along." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Benjamin's face paled. "That's a ridiculous lie." The judge banged the gavel again. "Order. Mr. Williams, you better have something to back up that claim." Henry didn't flinch. "Oh, I do, Your Honor." And with that, he reached into his pocket, ready to reveal the evidence that would change everything. The entire courtroom was frozen in shock. Benjamin Carter's smirk was gone. His eyes darted toward the judge, then to Henry. His fingers curled tightly around his pen. He had expected this case to be another easy win. But now, Henry Williams, the man he had insulted, humiliated, stood before him, claiming to have proof that could destroy everything. "Mr. Williams," the judge said, his voice stern, "if you are making false accusations, this will not end well for you." Henry nodded calmly. "I understand, Your Honor. But I promise you, this is the truth." The entire room held its breath as Henry reached into his pocket. Benjamin's hands clenched into fists. The jury members leaned forward, their curiosity burning. And then, Henry's pocket was empty. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Benjamin let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Oh, this is priceless. Ladies and gentlemen, he claimed to have evidence and now, poof, it's gone." He turned to the jury with a grin. "Do you see what's happening here? This is what happens when people who don't belong in court try to play lawyer." Henry's heart pounded. He had the proof. He knew he did. So where was it? His mind raced back to that morning. He had placed the paper in his pocket before leaving for court. But now, standing here, it was missing. Had someone taken it? The judge sighed. "Mr. Williams, unless you have actual evidence, we must continue as scheduled." Benjamin smirked. "More like, end this trial quickly." Henry's fists tightened. He had been humiliated in front of everyone. He needed time to figure out what had happened. He took a deep breath. "Your Honor, I understand. But I ask for the chance to present my case properly. Just a little more time." The judge studied Henry for a long moment. Then, with a nod, he said, "Very well. You will have time to question the witness. But if you waste this court's time, I will not be so lenient." Henry exhaled slowly. This wasn't over. For now, he just needed to stay calm. The next break in the trial gave Henry a chance to think. He sat in the hallway, running through everything in his mind. Peter, his lawyer, sat next to him, flipping through notes nervously. "Henry, what was this proof you were talking about?" Henry rubbed his forehead. "It was a letter. A letter that proves I wasn't the one who committed this crime." Peter frowned. "What did it say?" Henry lowered his voice. "It was an anonymous confession. Someone admitted to the robbery, but they didn't sign their name. They mentioned details about the break-in that no one else could have known. If I could have read that letter in court..." Peter's eyes widened. "Then the jury would have started questioning everything." Henry nodded. "Exactly." Peter glanced around the hallway, then whispered, "Are you sure you had it when you walked in?" Henry clenched his jaw. "I was sure. But now, someone took it." Peter swallowed hard. "If someone stole your evidence, that means someone in this courthouse doesn't want the truth coming out." A chill ran down Henry's spine. Back in the courtroom, the trial resumed. Benjamin stood confidently. "Your Honor, I believe we've entertained enough of Mr. Williams' theatrics. The evidence against him is strong, and the jury deserves to hear the truth." Henry stayed quiet. He needed to be careful now. He didn't have his letter, but he still had his mind. The prosecution's witness, the security guard who claimed to have seen Henry near the crime scene, was back on the stand. Henry stood. I have a few questions for the witness. The judge nodded. Proceed. Henry walked forward, keeping his voice steady. Sir, you testified that you saw me outside Carter Enterprises at 11 p.m. that night. Are you certain about the time? The guard hesitated. Yes. I checked my watch. Henry tilted his head. And you said I was acting suspiciously?
Yes.
Henry folded his arms. Tell me, if you saw me acting suspiciously, why didn't you call the police right away? The guard's mouth opened, then shut. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. I wasn't sure at first. Henry nodded. You weren't sure? But you were sure enough to tell the court today that I was the thief? The guard shifted in his seat. Benjamin quickly stood. Objection. Mr. Williams is badgering the witness. The judge raised a hand. Overruled. Continue, Mr. Williams. Henry turned back to the guard. Sir, one more question. You say you saw me clearly. Can you describe exactly what I was wearing that night? The guard blinked. I think it was a dark jacket. And, Henry raised an eyebrow.
And
the courtroom was dead silent. The guard cleared his throat. And a hat. Maybe a hat. Henry turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, my store has security cameras. I was working late that night. The footage will show exactly what I was wearing. And I can promise you, he turned back to the guard, it wasn't a dark jacket or a hat. The guard's face paled. The jury whispered among themselves. Benjamin's face tightened with frustration. Henry smiled slightly. The truth was beginning to break through. After the trial adjourned for the day, Henry sat outside the courthouse, watching the sunset. His mind was still racing. Then, a voice whispered behind him. You're smarter than I thought. Henry turned quickly. A man in a gray hoodie stood in the shadows, watching him. Henry's heart pounded. Who are you? The man took a step closer. The one who wrote the letter. Henry's breath caught. You. The man shoved a small piece of paper into Henry's hand. You need to be careful. This case is bigger than you think. Henry unfolded the note and read the words scribbled inside. You were never supposed to be blamed, but someone made sure you were. When Henry looked up, the man was gone. His hands trembled as he clutched the note. Someone had set him up, and whoever they were still watching. Henry's fingers tightened around the small note. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. The words on the paper confirmed what he had suspected all along. He was being framed. But by who? And why? He scanned the dimly lit street, hoping to spot the man in the gray hoodie again. But the stranger had vanished, slipping into the night like a ghost. Peter rushed out of the courthouse, his tie loosened and his eyes wide with worry. Henry, what's wrong? Wordlessly, Henry handed him the note. Peter's face paled as he read it. This means someone set you up on purpose. Henry exhaled sharply. And they wanted me to take the fall. But why? Peter shook his head. This is dangerous. If someone framed you, that means they're willing to do anything to keep the truth buried. Henry straightened. Then we dig it up? Peter hesitated. We need to be careful, Henry. If whoever did this finds out we're onto them. Henry met his gaze. They already know. Peter swallowed hard. The trial wasn't just about proving Henry's innocence anymore. It was about exposing the real criminals before they could strike again. The next morning, Henry and Peter met in a small cafe, away from prying eyes. They spread out everything they knew on the wooden table. Witness testimonies, court documents, and Henry's alibi from the night of the robbery. Peter rubbed his forehead. Okay, let's think. The prosecution's key evidence is that a security guard saw you near Carter Enterprises. But we know that witness was shaky on details. If we can discredit him completely, their case falls apart. Henry nodded. And I need to find out what happened to my letter. Someone stole it before I could present it in court. Peter frowned. Who had access to you before the trial? Henry thought for a moment. His pockets had been full when he left his house that morning. Then, as soon as he entered the courthouse, he was searched at security. The only people near him after that were Peter, a few other lawyers, and his eyes darkened. Benjamin Carter. The arrogant lawyer had walked past Henry just before the trial started. He had bumped into him slightly, laughing smugly as he did. Could he have taken the letter? Henry clenched his fists. Peter noticed the shift in Henry's expression. What is it? I think I know who took my letter. Peter's eyes widened. Who? Henry exhaled. Benjamin Carter. Peter sat back, stunned. You think he stole it? Henry nodded. He had motive. If that letter had been read in court, his case would have crumbled. And he had opportunity. He bumped into me right before the trial started. Peter hesitated. That's a serious accusation, Henry. Henry's voice was firm. I need to find out if I'm right. Peter sighed. And how do you plan to do that? Henry leaned forward. By making him confess. That afternoon, Henry made his move. He knew Benjamin Carter was too smart to admit anything in court. But outside of it, that was different. Henry walked into the courthouse lobby, pretending to be deep in thought. He let his hands shake slightly, making himself look worried. Benjamin, as expected, was standing near the coffee machine, smug as ever. Henry took a deep breath and walked over. Carter. Benjamin turned, his usual smirk plastered on his face. Ah, Mr. Williams. How does it feel to be drowning in your own lies? Henry forced himself to look defeated. You were right, he muttered. I thought I could win this, but, without my evidence, I have nothing. Benjamin sipped his coffee. Oh, that mysterious letter you claimed to have? He chuckled. It's almost like it never existed. Henry let his gaze drop. Yeah, almost. Benjamin's smirk widened. What a shame. Henry didn't move. He waited, watching. And then, Benjamin made a mistake. He leaned in slightly and lowered his voice. If you think a piece of paper was going to save you, you're more naive than I thought. Henry's heart raced. There it was. Benjamin knew about the letter. And if he knew about it, that meant he had seen it. Henry took a slow step back. Guess I really was a fool, he murmured. Benjamin laughed, patting Henry on the shoulder as if he had already won. Yes, you were. Henry clenched his fists, but he didn't react. Instead, he walked away, his mind spinning. He had him. Now, he just needed proof. That night, Henry and Peter sat in Peter's cramped office, going over the plan. We need solid evidence that Carter took your letter, Peter said. A confession won't be enough in court. Henry thought for a moment. Then an idea struck him. What if we make him slip up in front of the judge? Peter raised an eyebrow. You think you can trick him? Henry smirked. I don't need to trick him. I just need to make him too confident. Peter hesitated. Henry, Carter is dangerous. If you push him too far, he could turn this against you. Henry's voice was steady. If we don't stop him, he's going to keep doing this to innocent people. Peter nodded slowly. All right, let's bring him down. The next day in court, the tension was thick. Benjamin Carter was as arrogant as ever, standing at his table with his usual air of superiority. The jury watched him closely, waiting for his next move. Henry stood up, his hands steady. Your Honor, I would like to question Mr. Carter. Benjamin scoffed. Me? I'm not the one on trial. Henry met his gaze. You are today. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed carefully, Mr. Williams. Henry turned to Benjamin. Mr. Carter, you have worked on many cases, correct? Benjamin smirked. Of course. And in those cases, have you ever encountered missing evidence? Benjamin tilted his head. It happens. Henry nodded. Like my missing letter? Benjamin's eyes flickered for just a second. I wouldn't know anything about that. Henry stepped closer. Are you sure? Because you seemed to know a lot about it yesterday. Benjamin's smirk faltered. Excuse me? Henry folded his arms. Yesterday, you said that I was naive for thinking a piece of paper could save me. That's funny, because at no point did I tell you what was written in that letter. The courtroom went still. Benjamin's face darkened. You're twisting my words. Henry shook his head. No, I'm proving something. The only way you would know what was in my letter is if you saw it yourself. A slow murmur spread through the courtroom. The jury whispered among themselves. The judge frowned. Mr. Carter, is this true? Benjamin's jaw tightened. His hands clenched at his sides. Henry took a step forward, his voice firm. You stole my letter, Carter. You knew it would destroy your case. You tried to bury the truth. The courtroom was silent. Then, Benjamin slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The jury was no longer looking at Henry as a criminal. They were looking at Benjamin as a liar. And for the first time since the trial began, Benjamin Carter looked afraid. The courtroom crackled with tension. Benjamin Carter's face had lost its smug arrogance. His usual confidence had been replaced by something else, panic. He clenched his fists, his mouth tightening as the jury whispered among themselves. Henry held his ground, his heartbeat steady. He had done what he needed to do. He had planted the seed of doubt. Now, he just had to let it grow. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Carter, Mr. Williams has made a serious accusation. Do you have a response? Benjamin's lips pressed into a thin line. Then, like flipping a switch, he let out a laugh. This is absurd, Your Honor, he said, shaking his head. Mr. Williams is trying to distract the court from the fact that he is the one on trial, not me. He has no evidence, just wild claims. Henry watched him carefully. Carter was trying to regain control, but it was too late. The jury had seen him break. The judge glanced at Henry. Mr. Williams, unless you have further proof to support your claim, we must move forward. Henry nodded. I understand, Your Honor. He turned toward the jury. But let me ask you something. Why would an innocent man be so afraid of a letter? Benjamin stiffened. The courtroom murmured again. Henry took a deep breath. He couldn't push too hard just yet. He needed to be smart. Your Honor, he said finally, I have no further questions for Mr. Carter at this time. The judge gave him a long look before nodding. Very well. We will continue with closing arguments tomorrow. The gavel slammed. Court adjourned. As soon as court let out, Peter pulled Henry aside. That was risky, he whispered. Carter almost lost it. Henry exhaled. That was the point. Peter frowned. What do you mean? Henry's voice was low. He's too arrogant to let this go. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else. But now, I've put him in a position where he knows we're onto him. He'll make a mistake. Peter crossed his arms. And if he doesn't? Henry gave him a steady look. Then we force him to. That night, Henry barely slept. He kept replaying the trial in his head, looking for cracks in Carter's defense. Then, just past midnight, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. His stomach tightened. He hesitated before answering. Hello? A distorted voice crackled through the line. Stop pushing, Mr. Williams. Henry's breath caught. Who is this? Silence. Then, you don't understand what you're up against. A click. The call ended. Henry stared at his phone, his grip tightening. This wasn't just about him anymore. Someone was scared, and that meant he was getting close. The next morning, Henry walked into court determined. But something felt off. As he took his seat, Peter leaned in. Henry, we have a problem. Henry tensed. What? Peter handed him a document. The prosecution just submitted new evidence against you. Henry's stomach dropped as he scanned the papers. Security footage. Not from the bookstore. Not from Carter Enterprises. But from an ATM nearby. And in the blurry, grainy image, a figure who looked like Henry was withdrawing money. Peter's face was grim. They're saying this is the stolen cash. Henry's mind raced. He knew he hadn't been there. But the image, it was convincing. The courtroom doors opened. Benjamin Carter walked in, his confidence fully restored. He shot Henry a smirk, then turned to shake hands with the prosecutor. And in that moment, Henry knew. Carter had planted this evidence. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was war. The image on the screen loomed over the courtroom like a dark cloud. Henry stared at the grainy footage, his mind racing. It wasn't him. It couldn't be him. But to the jury? To the judge? It looked bad. Peter clenched his jaw. They dropped this at the last second. We didn't even get a chance to review it before court. Henry's stomach tightened. That wasn't an accident. Carter had planned it this way. He wanted to shake Henry. He wanted to force him into a corner with no time to react. The judge adjusted his glasses. Prosecution, please explain this new evidence. The prosecutor, a woman named Rachel Porter, stood. She was sharp, professional, and had a reputation for being relentless. Your Honor, this footage was obtained from an ATM camera near Carter Enterprises. The withdrawal was made on the same night as the theft, and the amount matches the stolen funds. She turned to Henry. Mr. Williams, do you deny this is you in the footage? Henry exhaled slowly. Yes. That's not me. Benjamin Carter smirked. Well, that's convenient. Henry clenched his fists, but forced himself to stay calm. Your Honor, may I ask a question? The judge nodded. Proceed. Henry turned to Rachel Porter. Ms. Porter, when exactly was this footage recovered? Rachel checked her notes. 2 days ago. Henry raised an eyebrow. And when was it submitted as evidence? She hesitated. This morning. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Henry nodded. So you had this footage for 2 days, but only presented it today? Why the delay? Rachel's expression didn't change. The evidence had to be verified. Henry tilted his head. Verified by who? A pause. Then, Mr. Carter's team. The murmur in the courtroom grew louder. Henry glanced at Benjamin. For the first time, the lawyer's smirk faltered slightly. Henry turned back to Rachel. So let me get this straight. Mr. Carter, the man who benefits most from this footage, was the one who verified it? Rachel shifted slightly. The footage was reviewed for authenticity. Henry nodded. And was it reviewed by an independent forensic analyst? Rachel's lips pressed together. No. The jury whispered among themselves. The judge rubbed his chin. Henry's confidence grew. Carter thought he had buried him, but he had overplayed his hand. Henry turned to the judge. Your Honor, I request that this footage be examined by an independent forensic expert before it is accepted as evidence. The judge nodded. That's a reasonable request. The trial will pause until an expert reviews the footage. He banged his gavel. Court is adjourned until further notice. Benjamin Carter's jaw clenched. He had lost control of the narrative. And Henry wasn't done yet. Outside the courthouse, Peter let out a long breath. That was close. Henry exhaled. Carter is desperate. He's trying to rush this case before we can fight back. Peter nodded. And if we can prove that footage was manipulated or planted, then Carter's entire case collapses, Henry finished. Peter ran a hand through his hair. But if he was bold enough to fake evidence, we need to be careful. He won't stop until he wins. Henry's mind went back to the phone call from the night before. You don't understand what you're up against. Someone was trying to warn him. But why? And more importantly, who? The next morning, Henry and Peter met with a forensic video analyst named David Collins. He was a tall, thin man with thick glasses and a serious expression. He sat in front of a computer, analyzing the ATM footage frame by frame. After an hour of silence, David leaned back. Well, he said finally, you were right to be suspicious. Henry and Peter leaned in. What do you mean? David adjusted his glasses. This footage was doctored. Peter's eyes widened. Are you sure? David nodded. Absolutely. The timestamp has been altered, and the person in the footage has been digitally enhanced to resemble Mr. Williams. It's a deep fake. Henry's stomach twisted. Benjamin Carter had fabricated evidence against him. Peter shook his head. This is beyond unethical. This is criminal. David sighed. And that's not all. Look at this. He zoomed in on the ATM screen in the footage. Henry's breath caught. There was a reflection in the glass. And in that reflection was a face. A familiar one. Peter gasped. That's... Henry nodded grimly. The security guard from the trial. The very same man who had claimed he saw Henry near the crime scene. The setup was bigger than he had thought. And now? Now, he had proof. Back in court, Benjamin Carter looked more confident than ever. Your Honor, he said smoothly, I believe the jury has seen enough. The footage speaks for itself. Henry stood. Actually, Your Honor, I'd like to present new findings. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Henry turned to the jury. The footage Mr. Carter so proudly introduced was, in fact, doctored. Gasps rippled through the room. Benjamin laughed. Oh, please. Do you have any proof of this ridiculous claim? Henry smiled. As a matter of fact, I do. David Collins walked in, holding a USB drive. The judge motioned to him. Mr. Collins, please state your credentials. David adjusted his glasses. I'm a forensic video analyst with 15 years of experience. I reviewed the ATM footage submitted as evidence, and I can confirm without a doubt that it was altered. The jury whispered furiously. The judge frowned. And do you have proof of this claim? David nodded. Yes, Your Honor. If I may. The judge gestured for him to continue. The courtroom lights dimmed as David played the footage. This is the video provided by the prosecution, David explained. Now, watch closely. He zoomed in on the ATM screen, and there, clear as day, was the security guard's reflection. The same guard who had testified against Henry. The same guard who had claimed Henry was near the crime scene. The room erupted in shock. Benjamin's face drained of color. The judge's eyes darkened. Mr. Carter, do you have an explanation for this? Carter's hands clenched. This is ridiculous. A coincidence. Henry shook his head. No, it's not. It's proof that I was framed. And now, the only question is, who ordered it? Silence. Then, a loud bang echoed through the courtroom. The doors swung open. 2 police officers marched in, and between them, the security guard, handcuffed. His face was pale, his eyes filled with fear. The officer looked at the judge. Your Honor, we have an urgent development in this case. Everyone held their breath. Then, the officer turned to Benjamin Carter. This man has confessed. Benjamin's face went completely still. The officer's next words made the courtroom explode. He says he was paid by Mr. Carter. The room erupted into chaos. And for the first time ever, Benjamin Carter had no words. The courtroom was in absolute chaos. Gasps filled the air, and the jury members exchanged stunned glances. Reporters in the back scrambled to take notes, their pens scratching against their notepads. Benjamin Carter, the once arrogant lawyer, sat frozen in place. His face had lost all color, his mouth slightly open in shock. The judge slammed his gavel. Order. I will have order in my courtroom. Slowly, the murmurs quieted. The officer standing beside the handcuffed security guard cleared his throat. Your Honor, this man has confessed that he was paid to give false testimony against Mr. Williams. The payment came directly from Mr. Carter's personal account. A fresh wave of gasps. Peter turned to Henry, his eyes wide. We got him, he whispered. Henry exhaled, barely able to believe it. After everything, after the humiliation, the insults, the false evidence, Benjamin Carter was finally cornered. The judge turned a sharp eye toward Carter. Mr. Carter, do you have any response to this accusation? Benjamin swallowed hard. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The judge's voice hardened. Mr. Carter, you are being accused of witness tampering and fabricating evidence. I suggest you choose your next words very carefully. Benjamin's hands gripped the edge of the table. His usual smug confidence was gone, replaced by desperation. His mind was racing, but he had no way out. Then, all at once, his face darkened. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and leaned forward. Your Honor, these claims are outrageous. This man, he gestured toward the security guard, is lying to save himself. This is nothing but an attempt to discredit me because Mr. Williams knows he's guilty. Henry didn't flinch. He had expected this. The judge turned to the officer. Did this man provide any evidence of Mr. Carter's involvement? The officer nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We have copies of the financial transactions. The payment was made in installments, $10,000 total, wired directly from Mr. Carter's account to this man. The courtroom murmured again. Benjamin's face twisted in fury. That proves nothing. Someone could have used my account. This is a setup. Henry stood. Mr. Carter, you said earlier that I was making wild accusations. But now, you're the one grasping at straws. Benjamin turned sharply toward Henry. You're nothing but a nobody. You don't belong here, and you sure as hell don't have the brains to. He stopped, realizing his mistake too late. The courtroom fell completely silent. Then, Henry took a slow step forward, keeping his voice calm. There it is, he said softly. The real Benjamin Carter. Benjamin clenched his jaw, but he knew. He had just made a massive mistake. The jury wasn't looking at Henry like a criminal anymore. They were looking at Benjamin Carter like a liar, like a fraud. The judge turned to the bailiff. Seize Mr. Carter's phone and financial records immediately. This court will conduct a full investigation. The bailiff moved toward Carter, who shot up from his seat. This is a joke. I am one of the best lawyers in this state. You can't do this to me. The judge's eyes burned. Mr. Carter, if you speak out of turn one more time, you will be held in contempt. Benjamin's chest rose and fell rapidly, his breathing heavy. His world was crumbling before his eyes, and Henry could see it. This was the moment Carter realized he had lost. After the trial was adjourned, Henry and Peter stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun. For the first time in weeks, Henry felt like he could breathe again. Peter let out a long whistle. I have to admit, I wasn't sure how this would go. But you played that perfectly, Henry. Henry chuckled. I wasn't playing. I was just telling the truth. Peter shook his head, smiling. Well, that truth just destroyed one of the most powerful lawyers in the state. Henry sighed. It's not just about Carter. Someone else was behind this. Peter frowned. You think Carter was just a pawn? Henry nodded. Someone else wanted me framed. Someone else was pulling the strings. Peter rubbed his chin. So what now? Henry's jaw tightened. Now? I find out who set all of this in motion. Peter exhaled. You just got out of one legal battle. You really want to walk into another? Henry looked into the distance. He had spent his life being underestimated, insulted, treated like he wasn't smart enough, wasn't important enough. But now? Now, he was ready. I don't have a choice, he said finally. This isn't over. Peter sighed. Then let's figure out who's really behind this. Henry nodded. And as they walked away from the courthouse, one thing was certain. The real fight was only just beginning. Henry sat in the quiet of his bookstore, staring at the small note the hooded man had given him days ago. You were never supposed to be blamed. But someone made sure you were. Someone in the shadows had orchestrated everything. The fake evidence, the false testimony, and Benjamin Carter's involvement. But Carter, as corrupt as he was, wasn't the mastermind. He was too arrogant, too reckless. Someone more powerful was pulling the strings. But who? The soft chime of the bookstore bell broke Henry's thoughts. Peter stepped inside, carrying a folder stuffed with papers. He dropped it onto the wooden counter and exhaled sharply. You were right, Peter said, shaking his head. This goes deeper than Carter. Henry frowned, flipping open the folder. What did you find? Peter pointed to a document. Look at this. These are the financial records for Carter Enterprises. Henry scanned the numbers. Then he saw it. A deposit. A huge deposit, $500,000, wired into Carter Enterprises just 1 week before Henry's arrest. Henry's eyes narrowed. That's a lot of money. Peter nodded. And the sender? A company called Everland Holdings. Henry looked up. Never heard of it. Peter sighed. Neither had I. So I dug deeper. He pulled out another sheet. Everland Holdings is a shell company. No real employees, no real office. Just a name on paper. But I traced the ownership. Henry leaned in. And Peter flipped the page over, revealing a name written in bold letters. Thomas Grayson. Henry froze. He knew that name. Everyone did. Thomas Grayson was one of the wealthiest men in the state. A business mogul, philanthropist, and the owner of several major corporations. He had connections in politics, law, and finance. He wasn't just powerful. He was untouchable. Henry's fingers tightened around the paper. You're telling me Grayson was behind this? Peter nodded. That $500,000 deposit went straight into Carter's firm right before your trial. It's too much of a coincidence. Henry's jaw clenched. Why would a billionaire want to frame a bookstore owner? Peter hesitated. I don't know. But whatever this is, it's big. Henry exhaled slowly. Carter had been the front man, the one taking the heat. But Grayson? He was the real enemy. And if Grayson had the power to manipulate the courts, frame an innocent man, and control lawyers like Carter, then Henry had just made himself a target. Later that night, Henry locked up his bookstore and walked toward his small apartment. His mind was racing. What did Thomas Grayson want? And why had he gone to such lengths to frame him? The streets were quiet. Too quiet. Then, a rustling sound. Henry's instincts kicked in. He slowed his pace, pretending not to notice. A shadow moved near an alley. Henry's pulse quickened. He turned a corner. Then, footsteps. Fast. Behind him. Henry spun just as two men rushed toward him. He barely had time to react before one of them grabbed his arm, twisting it painfully. The other slammed him against a brick wall. Pain shot through his ribs, but Henry gritted his teeth. The taller man leaned in close. "Stop asking questions, Mr. Williams." Henry's breath came hard and fast. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into," the man continued. "Drop it. Walk away. Forget about Carter. Forget about Grayson." Henry met his eyes. "And if I don't?" The man smirked. "Then next time, we won't be so polite." He shoved Henry back against the wall. Hard. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, the two men vanished into the night. Henry stood there, his hands shaking, his ribs aching. But his mind was made up. This wasn't just about him anymore. Thomas Grayson had sent his men to threaten him. That meant one thing. Grayson was scared. And Henry? He wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. Henry sat on the edge of his bed, pressing an ice pack against his ribs. The dull ache in his side reminded him of the two men who had jumped him the night before. He replayed their words in his head. "Stop asking questions. Walk away. Forget about Grayson." Henry exhaled sharply. If Grayson had gone so far as to send men after him, it meant two things. 1. Grayson was involved. There was no doubt about it now. 2. Henry was getting too close to the truth. But what was the truth? Why had a billionaire framed a simple bookstore owner? A knock at the door snapped him from his thoughts. Peter's voice came from the other side. "Henry? You alive in there?" Henry sighed and stood up, wincing slightly as he walked over to unlock the door. Peter stepped inside, took one look at Henry's bruised face, and let out a low whistle. "Well, looks like someone didn't like you poking around." Henry shut the door behind him. "Grayson's men. They jumped me last night." Peter's eyes widened. "They what?" Henry nodded. "Told me to stop asking questions." Peter rubbed his face. "Okay, yeah. That's bad. That's really bad." He hesitated. "Maybe we should." Henry cut him off. "Don't say it." Peter sighed. "Henry, come on. Grayson isn't just some corrupt lawyer like Carter. He's Grayson. The man owns half the state. He has politicians, judges, law enforcement, all in his pocket." Henry's voice was firm. "Then it's time someone stood up to him." Peter groaned. "You realize how insane this is, right?" Henry nodded. "I do." Peter sighed again, rubbing his temples. Then he muttered, "Unbelievable," and pulled out a folder. "Fine. If you're determined to get yourself killed, I might as well help." Henry smirked. "That's the spirit." Peter ignored him and spread out the documents on the small table. "All right, listen. I kept digging into Everland Holdings, the shell company that sent money to Carter." Henry leaned in. "And?" Peter tapped a piece of paper. "It's been used before." Henry's eyes narrowed. "For what?" Peter exhaled. "Bribery. Witness payoffs. And," he paused, "false convictions." Henry's heart pounded. "How many?" Peter slid over a list. Henry scanned the names. His blood ran cold. Dozens of innocent people had been wrongfully convicted over the past 5 years, all tied to cases where Carter was the lead attorney, all funded through Everland Holdings, all connected to Grayson. Henry clenched his fists. "He's been doing this for years." Peter nodded grimly. "Looks that way." Henry exhaled. "And I was just his latest target." Peter hesitated. "But why you? What made him pick you?" Henry frowned, thinking. He was just a bookstore owner. He had no ties to Grayson, no involvement with Carter's law firm, nothing. So why him? Peter suddenly stiffened. "Wait a minute." He flipped through the documents again, then pulled out a court case from 3 years ago. "Look at this." Henry glanced at the paper. It was an old case, a corporate fraud lawsuit. "What about it?" Henry asked. Peter pointed at one of the witnesses listed. "Look at the name." Henry's eyes widened. David Williams. His father. Henry's stomach dropped. "My dad was a witness in this case?" Peter nodded. "Yeah. And he testified against one person." Henry scanned the page. His breath caught in his throat. Defendant, Thomas Grayson. The pieces clicked into place. His father had testified against Grayson years ago. And now, Grayson was getting revenge on his son. Henry's hands shook. That's why he framed me. Peter exhaled. Yeah. Looks like Grayson never forgets an enemy. Henry's mind raced. His father had passed away years ago, but Grayson still held a grudge. And now, he had tried to ruin Henry's life in retaliation. Henry clenched his jaw. Then we take him down. Peter shook his head. Henry, you don't just take down a guy like Grayson. He's not just corrupt. He's dangerous. Henry's voice was steady. So am I. Peter studied him for a moment, then sighed. You really aren't going to drop this, are you? Henry smirked. Nope. Peter groaned. Great. Guess I'm officially part of the Let's Get Ourselves Killed club. Henry chuckled. Welcome aboard. Peter shook his head but smiled slightly. All right. If we're doing this, we need a plan. Henry's eyes darkened. Then let's make one. That night, Henry and Peter sat in the dimly lit bookstore, going over every detail. We can't just accuse Grayson, Peter said. We need undeniable proof. Something that even his money can't make disappear. Henry nodded. We have Carter's bribery payments, the false convictions, the fake evidence in my case. Peter rubbed his chin. That's good, but it's not enough. We need to link Grayson directly to the crimes. Henry thought for a moment. What about Carter? Peter frowned. What about him? Henry's voice was calm but firm. He's desperate. He's backed into a corner. If we push him the right way, he might turn on Grayson. Peter's eyes widened. You think we can flip him? Henry nodded. If he sees Grayson as a bigger threat than us, he'll talk. Peter sighed. That's a huge gamble. Henry's voice was steady. It's our best shot. Peter hesitated, then finally nodded. All right, let's pay Carter a visit. The next morning, Henry and Peter arrived at the county jail. Benjamin Carter sat on the other side of the thick glass, his hands cuffed to the table. His usual arrogance was gone. His expensive suit was replaced with an orange jumpsuit. His face was unshaven, his hair slightly disheveled. But when he saw Henry, he smirked. Well, if it isn't my favorite bookstore owner. Henry picked up the phone. Carter. Carter leaned back in his chair. I assume you're not here for legal advice. Henry's voice was calm. We know about Grayson. Carter's smirk flickered. Peter crossed his arms. We know he's been funding your cases. We know he's been rigging trials. We know he's the reason innocent people are in prison. Carter exhaled. And what do you want from me? Henry met his gaze. The truth. Carter let out a slow laugh. You think I'm just going to betray Grayson? Henry's voice was steady. He set you up. Carter stopped laughing. Henry leaned forward. You think he's coming to save you? He's already moved on. To him, you're just another pawn. Another loose end to clean up. Carter's jaw clenched. Peter added, but if you talk now, you get a deal. You save yourself. Carter looked away, his mind racing. For the first time since this all started, he looked afraid. Henry's voice was calm but firm. You have one chance to get out of this, Carter. He held Carter's gaze. So what's it going to be? Carter exhaled slowly. Then, finally, I want a lawyer. Peter and Henry exchanged a glance. They had him. And soon, they would have Grayson. Benjamin Carter sat in silence, staring at the scratched metal table in the dimly lit interrogation room. His hands, still cuffed, drummed lightly against the surface. His usual arrogance had faded. He looked small, like a man who had just realized he was alone. Henry and Peter sat across from him, waiting. Carter exhaled sharply. You're asking me to betray the most powerful man in this state. Henry's voice was calm. He's already betrayed you. Carter's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Peter leaned forward. Think about it, Carter. Grayson doesn't care about you. You were useful, until you weren't. He's going to let you rot in here while he walks away clean. Carter's lips pressed into a thin line. Henry studied him carefully. This was it. This was the moment. Talk, Henry said quietly. And we'll make sure you don't take the fall for everything. Silence. Then, Carter let out a bitter chuckle. You think Grayson is just going to let me spill his secrets? Peter shrugged. He doesn't have a choice if you do it first. Carter exhaled, running a hand through his unkempt hair. He looked up, his eyes filled with something Henry had never seen before. Fear. Then, finally, he spoke. You're right, Carter admitted. Grayson runs everything. The courts, the banks, the police. He's been rigging cases for years. Henry's hands clenched. Why me? Why did he frame me? Carter hesitated, then sighed. Because of your father. Henry leaned in. Explain. Carter nodded. Thomas Grayson never forgets a grudge. Your father's testimony cost him millions. It was one of the few times he almost got taken down. He never let it go. So when the opportunity came to ruin you, he took it. Henry's stomach twisted. It wasn't just about the money. It was personal. Carter continued. He knew you were innocent. That wasn't the point. He wanted to destroy your life. To make sure the Williams name meant nothing, Henry exhaled slowly, trying to control his anger. Peter shook his head. And you helped him. Carter looked away. I didn't have a choice. Henry scoffed. There's always a choice. Carter smirked. Easy for you to say. But when a man like Grayson owns you, there's no way out. Henry's jaw tightened. Then let's change that. Carter frowned. How? Henry's voice was steady. You testify. You give us everything. Every case he's rigged, every judge he's bribed, every crime he's committed. Carter let out a harsh laugh. You really think one testimony will be enough to take down Grayson? Henry met his gaze. No, but it's a start. Carter hesitated. His mind was spinning. Then, he exhaled. If I do this, Carter said slowly, I need protection. If Grayson finds out I talked. Henry nodded. We'll make sure he doesn't. Carter exhaled. Fine. He leaned forward. But listen carefully. You're about to step into a world where rules don't matter, where money erases crimes, where people disappear for asking the wrong questions. Henry didn't flinch. Then I'll make sure I ask the right ones. Carter smirked slightly. You're either really brave or really stupid. Henry smirked back. Maybe both. Carter exhaled. All right. Let's take him down. 2 days later, Henry and Peter sat in the district attorney's office, watching as Carter gave his sworn statement. Names, dates, corrupt officials, everything. It was bigger than they had imagined. Judges had been paid off. Jury members threatened. Innocent people locked away while guilty criminals walked free. And at the top of it all, Thomas Grayson. When Carter finished, the district attorney, James Monroe, leaned back in his chair, his face pale. This is massive, Monroe said. If we go after Grayson, it's going to be a war. Henry nodded. Then let's fight. Monroe exhaled. We'll need an airtight case. Witnesses. More evidence. If we go after him and miss, he'll bury us all. Peter rubbed his temples. So what do we do? Monroe looked at Carter. We need to move you somewhere safe. If Grayson finds out you're talking, you're a dead man. Carter swallowed hard. Agreed. Monroe stood. I'll start putting things in motion. But Henry, be careful. Grayson won't go down without a fight. Henry nodded. Neither will I. That night, Henry walked home, his mind racing. Grayson's empire was built on corruption, on fear. He had destroyed lives, bought his way out of justice. But now, for the first time, he was vulnerable. And Henry wasn't going to stop. As he turned onto his street, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Hello? Silence. Then, a low, chilling voice. You should have listened, Mr. Williams. Henry's heart pounded. Grayson. The billionaire chuckled softly. I underestimated you. Henry's grip tightened on the phone. You framed me. You ruined innocent lives. You think you'll walk away from this? Grayson's voice was calm. I don't think it, Mr. Williams. I know it. Henry's breath came sharp and fast. Grayson continued. I own the courts, the police, the people you trust. He paused. You can't win. Henry's jaw clenched. Watch me. A beat of silence. Then, Grayson sighed. I was hoping you'd be smarter than this. A click. The line went dead. Henry stood in the middle of the dark street, his fists tightening. Grayson was coming for him, and this time, it was going to be a fight to the finish. The night was heavy with silence. Henry stood in the middle of the street, his phone still clutched in his hand. Grayson had made his move. The threat was clear. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was war. Henry took a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. Fear was exactly what Grayson wanted. He wanted Henry to back down, to crumble under the weight of his power. But that wasn't going to happen. Not now. Not ever. Henry turned and walked home, his mind racing. They had Carter's testimony, the bribery records, and the proof of tampered evidence. But Grayson was right about one thing. He owned people. The second Grayson realized the case was moving against him, he'd start pulling strings. Henry had to be faster. The next morning, Peter sat across from Henry in the bookstore, sipping his coffee with a deep frown. "You don't look like you slept." Henry exhaled. "Didn't." Peter sighed. "Yeah, well, that makes two of us." He set his cup down. "Grayson called you last night, didn't he?" Henry nodded. Peter rubbed his temples. "And I'm guessing he didn't call to offer you a settlement." Henry smirked slightly. "More like a warning." Peter shook his head. "We should go to Monroe. If Grayson is making threats—" "He's not making threats," Henry interrupted. "He's making moves. That means we need to do the same." Peter studied him for a moment, then sighed. "All right. So what's the plan?" Henry's voice was steady. "We make this too big for Grayson to bury." Peter raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" Henry leaned forward. "Grayson's power comes from the shadows. He bribes, manipulates, and silences people behind closed doors. But what happens when the entire world is watching?" Peter blinked. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his face. "You're talking about going public." Henry nodded. "We take this story to the press. We put the truth in front of the entire country before Grayson has a chance to erase it." Peter exhaled. "That's bold." Henry smirked. "It's our only shot." Peter sighed. "Okay. I know a few reporters who'd love to crack a story this big." Henry's jaw tightened. "Good. Let's bring Grayson into the light." That afternoon, Henry and Peter met with a well-known investigative journalist, Lisa Carter. She was sharp, relentless, and had taken down corrupt politicians before. She sat across from them in a private booth at a diner, listening carefully as Henry laid everything out: Carter's confession, the rigged trials, the deepfake evidence, and the bribery payments. When Henry finished, Lisa exhaled slowly, tapping her fingers against the table. "This is huge," she murmured. "If this gets out, it could blow up the entire legal system in this state." Henry nodded. "That's the point." Lisa leaned in. "You understand what you're doing, right? The second this goes public, Grayson is going to come after you with everything he has." Henry's expression was firm. "He already is." Lisa studied him for a long moment. Then she smirked. "All right, Williams. Let's bring down a billionaire." That night, Henry sat in his apartment, staring at the news. The story had broken. Lisa had done her job well. Her report was everywhere. News stations, online articles, social media. It was spreading faster than Grayson could control. Corruption in the courts? Millionaire Thomas Grayson accused of rigging trials, bribery, and false convictions. The article detailed Carter's confession, the money trail, and the fabricated evidence against Henry. Lisa had even included statements from some of the people Grayson had wrongfully convicted. Henry watched the coverage in silence. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. Henry exhaled sharply and answered. A low, dangerous voice spoke. "You made a mistake, Mr. Williams." Henry leaned back. "That's so?" Grayson's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now. "I told you. You can't win." Henry smirked. "Looks like the media disagrees." A long pause. Then, Grayson chuckled. "Do you really think exposing me changes anything? You're playing checkers. I'm playing chess." Henry's jaw tightened. "You're running out of moves." Grayson sighed. "I don't need moves. I have power. And when you wake up tomorrow, you'll realize just how small you really are." The line went dead. Henry clenched his fists. Grayson was planning something, and he needed to be ready. The next morning, Peter banged on Henry's door, his face pale. "Turn on the news. Now." Henry grabbed the remote and flipped the TV on. The headline hit him like a punch to the gut. New evidence links Henry Williams to criminal enterprise. Henry's stomach twisted. What the? The screen cut to a news anchor. Shocking developments this morning as newly uncovered financial records show that Henry Williams, the man who accused Thomas Grayson of corruption, may have ties to organized crime. According to confidential sources, large payments were made to Williams' bank account over the past year, allegedly linked to illegal activities. Henry's blood ran cold. That's a lie. Peter ran a hand through his hair. Of course it is. But Grayson doesn't care. He's fighting back the only way he knows how, by destroying you. Henry clenched his jaw. Where did this evidence come from? Peter sighed. Anonymous source. But I'd bet my life it was Grayson. Henry exhaled sharply. He's trying to flip the narrative. Make me the villain before he goes down. Peter nodded. And if we don't fight this now, the public will turn against you. Henry sat down, gripping his head. Grayson had money, influence, and control. He had just thrown everything at Henry in one final, desperate attack. The question was, how do you fight back against a lie so big that the whole world believes it? Henry didn't have time to think, because the next thing he heard was a loud knock at the door. A hard, authoritative knock. Then, a voice. Henry Williams. FBI. Open the door. Henry's breath caught. This was it. Grayson wasn't just trying to ruin his name. He was trying to put him behind bars. For good. Henry's heartbeat pounded in his ears. FBI? This wasn't just another threat. This was Grayson's checkmate move. The knock came again, louder, harder. Henry Williams, we have a warrant for your arrest. Open the door now. Peter grabbed Henry's arm, his face pale. What do we do? Henry's mind raced. Running wasn't an option. That would make him look guilty. Fighting back? Against the FBI? That was suicide. But if he let them arrest him, Grayson wins. Henry exhaled sharply. We let them in. Peter's eyes widened. Are you insane? Henry's voice was steady. If we run, we are criminals. If we fight back, we're resisting arrest. But if we stand our ground and make them prove this nonsense, we still have a chance. Peter swallowed hard, then nodded. Okay. Henry stepped forward and unlocked the door. The second it swung open, 3 federal agents stormed in, their guns drawn. Hands up. Henry slowly raised his hands. I'm not resisting. One of the agents grabbed his arm and yanked it behind his back, slapping a pair of cold steel cuffs onto his wrists. Henry Williams, you're under arrest for conspiracy, financial fraud, and obstruction of justice. Peter stepped forward. This is a setup. My client is innocent. The lead agent glanced at him. You can argue that in court, counselor. Henry gritted his teeth as they led him outside. The flashing red and blue lights of FBI vehicles painted the street. Neighbors peeked from their windows. Reporters swarmed like vultures, cameras flashing. Henry lifted his chin. If Grayson wanted him to break, he wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. As they shoved him into the back of the car, he locked eyes with a camera lens. Then he spoke 3 words loud and clear. Thomas Grayson did this. The reporters erupted. If Henry was going down, he was taking Grayson with him. 2 hours later, Henry sat in a cold interrogation room, still handcuffed. The steel table in front of him was empty except for a single case file with his name on it. He stared at the mirrored window, knowing someone was watching. Then, the door opened. A tall, well-dressed man in a navy blue suit stepped in, holding a folder. He had sharp eyes and a calm, calculating demeanor. He sat down, folding his hands neatly on the table. Mr. Williams. Henry didn't respond. The man sighed. I'm Special Agent Donovan. I assume you know why you're here. Henry met his gaze. Because a billionaire decided I was. Donovan smirked slightly. That's an interesting way to put it. Henry leaned forward. I was framed, and you know it. Donovan raised an eyebrow. Do I? Henry exhaled. Check my real financial records. Check everything. The money they say I received? I never saw a dime of it. Donovan was quiet for a moment, then opened the folder. The evidence against you is substantial. Henry clenched his jaw. Fabricated. Donovan studied him. You're saying Thomas Grayson set you up? Henry's voice was firm.
Yes.
Donovan tapped his fingers on the table. Why would he do that? Henry took a slow breath. Because I exposed him. Because I have evidence that he bribed lawyers, rigged trials, and put innocent people in prison. Donovan's face remained unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he smirked. Henry frowned. What? Donovan closed the folder. I believe you. Henry's eyes widened. You? What? Donovan exhaled. We've been watching Grayson for years. We know he's dirty, but he's careful. Too careful. He covers his tracks, buys his way out of trouble. Henry leaned forward. So why arrest me? Donovan tilted his head. Because we needed a way in. Henry's heart pounded. Donovan continued. Grayson's empire is built on fear. No one's ever been brave enough, or stupid enough, to fight back. He smirked slightly. Until you. Henry exhaled sharply. So what now? Donovan's voice hardened. Now we take him down. That night, Henry sat in a secure FBI office, free from his handcuffs. Peter sat beside him, rubbing his face. I cannot believe this is happening. Henry smirked. Yeah, me neither. Agent Donovan placed a document in front of them. Grayson isn't just running a corrupt legal system. He's involved in everything. Money laundering, offshore accounts, political bribery. Peter exhaled. So why haven't you arrested him? Donovan's jaw tightened. Because every time we get close, he makes our evidence disappear. Henry frowned. So how do we stop him? Donovan slid another file across the table. It was labeled, Thomas Grayson, black file. Henry flipped it open. His eyes widened. Inside were surveillance reports, offshore bank statements, recorded phone calls. Peter's breath caught. You have this? Donovan nodded. We've been collecting dirt for years. But nothing we have is bulletproof. We need someone on the inside. Henry's stomach twisted. Carter. Donovan nodded. Exactly. He was one of Grayson's closest associates. If he flips, it's game over. Peter exhaled. But that's a big if. Donovan smirked. Not anymore. He pulled out a signed document. Witness Protection Agreement, Benjamin Carter. Henry's eyes widened. He flipped? Donovan nodded. After the media storm you caused, Carter realized Grayson wasn't going to protect him. He agreed to testify. Henry let out a slow breath. This was it. The final nail in Grayson's coffin. 2 days later, a bombshell arrest warrant was issued. The news exploded. Breaking news. Billionaire Thomas Grayson charged with conspiracy, bribery, and fraud. The footage was everywhere. FBI agents stormed Grayson's penthouse. He was dragged out in handcuffs, his face blank with rage. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. And in the midst of the chaos, Henry watched from a distance. For the first time in weeks, he felt free. Peter clapped a hand on his shoulder. We did it. Henry exhaled. Yeah. He watched as Grayson was shoved into a black SUV, his empire collapsing around him. And just before the car door shut, Grayson turned. For a split second, his cold, blue eyes locked onto Henry's. A silent promise. This wasn't over. Then the door slammed shut, and Thomas Grayson was gone. As the sun set, Henry stood outside his bookstore, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. He had been framed, humiliated, and nearly destroyed. But he had fought back, and won. Peter stepped beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. So what now? Henry smirked. Now. He took a sip. Now, I go back to selling books. Peter chuckled. After all that? Henry grinned. Yeah, but first, I think I'll write one. Peter laughed. I'd buy that. Henry looked out into the horizon. Grayson was gone. Justice had been served. And for the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. The world had changed. The headlines ran for weeks. Thomas Grayson convicted. Sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Corruption exposed. How a simple bookstore owner brought down a billionaire. Benjamin Carter testifies against Grayson in court. The trial had been brutal, but in the end, Grayson had fallen. The evidence had been too overwhelming. The jury had taken less than 2 hours to reach a verdict, guilty on all charges. As the judge handed down the sentence, Henry had watched from the gallery, Carter sitting beside him in a bulletproof vest, knowing full well that testifying against Grayson had made him a marked man. When the gavel slammed down, it was over. Grayson was escorted out in handcuffs. And for the first time in his life, Henry Williams had won. Months passed. Life slowly returned to normal. Henry reopened his bookstore, finally able to focus on what he loved again. Customers trickled in, whispering about the Henry Williams case as if he were a legend. Peter still visited, still complained that Henry was wasting his talents behind a cash register. "You took down a billionaire, and you're selling paperbacks?" He'd groan. Henry would just smile. "Yeah, and I like it." Lisa Carter's article had won awards. Benjamin Carter had entered witness protection. And Special Agent Donovan? He had gotten a promotion after Grayson's conviction. Everything had changed. But Henry remained the same. And he liked it that way. One evening, just as Henry was locking up the store, the bell chimed. A man in a gray hoodie stepped inside. Henry's breath caught. He recognized him instantly. The same man who had given him the mysterious note all those months ago. The one who had warned him. Henry straightened. "It was you." The man smirked. "You're welcome." Henry folded his arms. "Who are you?" The man hesitated, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, old photograph and handed it to Henry. Henry frowned and turned it over. His heart stopped. It was a picture of his father. And beside him, a younger version of the man standing in front of him. Henry's throat went dry. You knew my dad?" The man nodded. "He saved my life a long time ago. I owed him. When I saw Grayson coming after you, I knew I had to warn you." Henry's hands tightened around the photo. His father had always been a good man, a man who had fought for what was right. And now, even years after his death, he was still protecting Henry. The man turned to leave. Henry called out, "Wait, what's your name?" The man glanced over his shoulder, smirking. "Let's just say, I repaid my debt." Then he walked out the door and disappeared into the night. Henry stood in the quiet bookstore, staring at the photo. Everything had come full circle. His father had fought for justice, and now, so had he. Henry exhaled slowly, placing the picture on the counter. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. No more battles, no more fights, just books, coffee, and the quiet life he had always wanted. Smiling to himself, Henry flipped the sign on the door to closed and stepped outside into the night. The stars above shone brightly, and the world felt right again. This was the ending he had fought for. And finally, it was his.